Today we celebrate a major solemnity of the Church called the Solemnity of the Most Body and Blood of Christ, known in the past as the Feast of Corpus Christi. So in our Gospel today, Jesus tells us that He is the living bread that came down from heaven. And I ask myself and I ask you, what do we think of when we think of Jesus? Do we think simply of Him as someone who walked the earth 2,000 years ago? Or can we think of Him as God? Does that interfere with how we think of Him as a person, because He was both? And how do we relate all of that to thinking of Him in the Holy Eucharist, as who we will receive today later on, those of us who are present here? With this time of COVID-19, I've had a little extra time for reading, perhaps not as much as I'd have liked, but I did read a few publications of restoration, a publication of Madonna House. And Madonna House is the mother house of the Marian Center in Regina, a soup kitchen in Regina. And in this one publication, Annie Marie Horkham told the story of when she was a working guest at Madonna House at Cumbermere. And when Annie Marie went there, she was somewhat troubled, and she noticed that she didn't have the love for Jesus that she saw in a lot of the people that live at Madonna House permanently. They take vows, permanent vows, and they offer their lives to Madonna House. Annie Marie noticed she didn't have the love they had for Jesus, so she prayed for that love. And she went every day to adoration while she was there, and that was the object of her intentions through adoration, the main object. But as time went on, day by day, she didn't feel that her prayer was answered. It came to the last day, and still she didn't feel she had the love for Jesus that she saw in those other people around her. So she went home, somewhat disappointed, and on the fairly long way home, I think she spent time in a couple airports, fairly long periods. And in the one airport, she was somewhat depressed and looked at her watch and realized that this was the time that the people would be gathered for Mass in that same chapel where she spent so much time, and she felt a terrific longing to be there with them, to receive Jesus in the Holy Eucharist. She was overwhelmed with emotion, and in her words, she said she had a tangled mix of love and longing burning in her heart. It was then that she realized that her prayer was answered. Jesus had given her that love for Him when she needed it the most. So Jesus answered her prayer not when she expected, and perhaps not in the way she expected. And it's much the same with us. Jesus doesn't always answer prayers when or how we expect. We needn't feel bad if we can't predict how Jesus acts. We think of the apostles, how they spent 3 years with Jesus and they still couldn't get it right. When Jesus died, when he was taken away at the Garden of Gethsemane, they scattered. They still didn't get it right, though He had been trying to tell them for 3 years about His oncoming passion and death. Jesus treated them the same. He helped them for their own good by stretching them and by leading them and by stretching their comfort zones. He did that with Annie Marie Horkham, and He does that with us. And I think it would be good to think about what would have happened if Jesus' life had ended in the tomb. His apostles were scattered and confused, and if it would have ended there, that would have been it. Jesus would have been just another would-be Messiah that went by the wayside. But then something happened. The resurrection, Jesus' resurrection happened. And And that changed everything. The apostles suddenly were able to start to make sense of all that Jesus had told them. After Pentecost especially, the books of the New Testament were churned out one after another over the next 100 years. And the resurrection changed everything. I did manage to read one book during this time of COVID-19, and it was by Father James Allison. It was called Knowing Jesus. And in this book, James Allison speaks about the resurrection. Maybe I'm getting a little off topic, but the resurrection is so tied in with the body and blood of Jesus. And Father Allison says that the resurrection wasn't just another event in Jesus' life. It actually changed Jesus. It became a part of Jesus, a part of his makeup. So it's no wonder that it has an effect on us, if it had an effect on Jesus. And our chance to receive that effect is to receive Jesus in his body and blood. The resurrection should mean everything to us. It gives us a new path to follow. It's a life-changing event for not only for Jesus, but for all of us. And borrowing a phrase from today, through the resurrection and through receiving him today in the Eucharist, Jesus offers us a new normal. And let's explore a little about that new normal. In the second reading, Paul tells us that we who are many are one body, for we all partake of one bread. Meaning that those of us who receive Eucharist and those who wish to receive but are unable to because of the restrictions, we become all one body. We are all one. It means even more than that. It means that we take that body, that precious Eucharist out into the community, and everyone in some way is able to share and become one. And we are called, just as Jesus did, to look on the whole world, our whole community, and extending to the whole world, that oneness, that we are all one in this together. Jesus gave us an example that he expects us to follow. He treated everyone the same. The first people he probably should have avoided and despised were the tax collectors, but no, he made friends with Zacchaeus, and Matthew was even one of his apostles. He reached out to people of questionable morals. The woman at the well, Jesus talked to her when others avoided her. Mary Magdalene became one of his closest followers. And even people who practice what would be considered false religions tainted with paganism, the Samaritans. Jesus reached out to them, and many of the Samaritans, a great number of them, became his followers. Even Pharisees, if they would listen, like Nicodemus did, Jesus accepted them. He tried to include everyone, and that's the new normal that he offers. Another way of looking at what Jesus offers us is if we look at what he did. He was confronted with violence, and at the time, all the religions of that time were spawned on violence. They were born of violence. The religions of that time followed numerous gods, and these gods gained their power or their supposed authority over the people by practicing violence. These gods overcame another violence by a greater violence. So Jesus was up against this, and it was expected that he would do the same. He would free Israel of the Romans by violence. And he didn't. He made a mockery of this way of thinking, and he still does today. He conquered violence with love. This is something completely unheard of in Jesus' day, and even today it's becoming somewhat of an odd theory, an odd practice to confront violence and conquer it with love. But We are called through the Holy Eucharist to imitate Jesus and to make that part of our lives. It's no wonder, I guess, the apostles didn't get it. And it's no wonder we don't get it sometimes. Jesus' way was so out of what they were used to. Through receiving Jesus in the Eucharist, we have a chance to share in the fruits of Jesus' resurrection. And it might change us only a little at a time, each time we receive, but it does change us. When we receive Jesus' Eucharist in good faith, in good standing, it will change us. It will make us more like Jesus. There's a verse in later on in John 14, little past our gospel, that I think highlights a little of how that Jesus and God the Father wish to actually become one with us, to join us through the Eucharist. And I'll read this verse. It's Jesus is answering a question of St. Jude the Apostle, and Jesus tells him, "Those who love me will keep my word, and my Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home in them." And I think this verse, this passage, offers us a glimpse of the intimacy that Jesus and God the Father wish to have with us. And it's an intimacy that became real for Annie Marie Horkham and can become more and more real for us as we receive Jesus. What better way than that to find peace in our troubled times?